Snow falls thick over Quebec City. The air is sharp, the streets silent, and the old stone walls glow faintly under the icy lamps. To most people, this is the postcard image of Quebec, a beautiful, European-style city wrapped in winter magic. But beneath this charm lies a darkness that only reveals itself on the coldest nights. Because here, buried under snow and time, lies a battlefield that refuses to rest. A place where soldiers fought, bled, and died, and where some believe they never truly left. This is the Plains of Abraham, a stretch of land that has seen more than just history. It has seen horror. It has soaked up the cries of dying men, the thunder of muskets, the clash of empires. And according to countless witnesses, it still echoes with those sounds. Even now, more than 2 centuries later, the year was 1759. The French controlled Quebec, the jewel of New France, a city built on cliffs overlooking the St. Lawrence River. The British wanted it, and to take it, they needed to face the French army directly, outside the walls. On September 13th, that is exactly what happened. The Battle of the Plains of Abraham was short, but it was brutal. Muskets cracked in the morning fog. Cannons roared across the frozen earth. Soldiers screamed as they fell, clutching wounds that would never heal. By the end, both commanding generals, James Wolfe for the British and the Marquis de Montcalm for the French, were dead. The fate of Canada was changed forever. But while empires celebrated or mourned, the soldiers remained. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, buried hastily under the snow. Many left without proper graves, their bodies swallowed by the land, their spirits restless. And from that moment on, people began to whisper that the battlefield was alive. It all walk across the plains today, and you might think it is peaceful. In winter, children laugh as they slide down snowy hills. But if you come at night, when the snow falls heavy and the city grows silent, the atmosphere changes. The wind whistles differently. The silence is not empty. It feels watched, as if the ground itself remembers. Locals say that during heavy snowstorms you can hear things, strange things. The distant crack of muskets when no one is there, the muffled sound of boots crunching across frozen earth, the faint echo of a battle cry carried by the icy wind. Some even say they've seen them, the soldiers, marching, waiting, haunting. One story tells of a security guard patrolling the area on a winter night. He saw figures moving in formation through the snow, their shapes clear under the moonlight. At first he thought they were late-night skiers, until he noticed their muskets, their old-style coats, their pale, rigid faces. When he called out, they dissolved into the snow. Another couple lost in Quebec during the 1990s claimed they saw men in uniforms walking ahead of them on the plains. Relieved, they tried to follow. But when they reached the spot, the snow was untouched. No footprints, no sign of anyone at all. The Plains of Abraham are supposed to be a park, a place of leisure. But for those who know its history, it is a graveyard without headstones. And some graves do not stay silent. When the snow buries the battlefield, the dead rise. That is what many believe. The stories only grow darker as the years go on. Some witnesses describe seeing entire regiments of soldiers appear during blizzards. Whiteout conditions, snow whipping across the field, and through it a column of men marching shoulder to shoulder. Muskets slung, faces pale, eyes blank. They walk toward the city walls and vanish into the storm. Others speak of lone soldiers, single figure wandering as though searching for his unit, his uniform torn, his hat askew, his musket dragging at his side. When approached, he looks up, but his face is hollow, his eyes lifeless. Within seconds, he fades back into the snow. Perhaps the most chilling accounts come from those who have felt the presence, even without seeing. Visitors walking across the plains after dark suddenly feel a heavy weight in the air, as though dozens of unseen eyes are watching. Some feel footsteps behind them, the crunch of boots following closely. But when they turn, nothing is there. The cold itself is different here. The stories of the Plains of Abraham are not just legends whispered by ghost tour guides. They are lived experiences, told by people who had no reason to invent them. Ordinary people, guards, tourists, students, even historians who walked into the snow one night and walked out with a memory that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. One of the earliest recorded encounters comes from the 19th century. A historian researching the battle wrote that, during a winter visit to the plains, he and his assistant heard the sound of marching boots. Not just one or two, dozens of them. A steady rhythm, as though an entire battalion was passing by. Yet when they looked across the white expanse, the field was empty. Snow lay undisturbed. The sound faded slowly, but the air around them grew painfully cold. Colder than the night itself. He never returned to the plains after dark again. Decades later, in the mid-20th century, a night watchman was making his rounds. The plains were quiet, covered in snow, the city far away and silent. Suddenly, he noticed shapes moving in the distance. Dark figures, aligned in rows, walking slowly across the field. He thought perhaps it was a military reenactment or a group of soldiers training. But then he realized their uniforms were wrong. Their hats, their muskets, their formation, all from another century. He froze in place as the figures passed before him. He left no tracks in the snow. As quickly as they appeared, they were gone. The guard quit his job soon after, refusing to patrol the plains again. Tourists have added their voices to the chorus of encounters. A couple visiting Quebec in the 1990s described being caught in a sudden snowstorm while exploring the plains at night. The storm was blinding. Visibility was almost zero. But through the sheets of white, they saw men marching. At least a dozen of them, their shapes blurry but unmistakable. Desperate not to get lost, the couple tried to follow the men. Yet within minutes, the figures faded into the storm, leaving the couple alone and disoriented. When they finally stumbled back to the main road, their footprints were the only ones in the snow. More recently, paranormal investigators have come to Quebec City with recording equipment determined to capture proof. And many believe they have. On multiple occasions, electronic voice recorders have picked up faint whispers on the plains. Voices speaking in French and English, sometimes overlapping, sometimes groaning in pain. One recording captured what sounded like a drum beat, steady and deep, echoing faintly in the background. Another caught a single, chilling phrase in French. Nous sommes toujours ici. We are still here. Skeptics argue that these sounds could be explained by natural phenomena. The wind, they say, can create eerie effects. Snow crunches, echoes, and shifts in ways that play tricks on the ear. But not everyone is convinced, especially not those who have felt something far more personal. One Quebec student walking home late after a party decided to cross the plains as a shortcut. The night was calm, the snow soft beneath his boots. Halfway across, he felt it. Footsteps behind him. Slow, deliberate, crunching through the snow at the exact same pace as his own. He turned. No one was there. He walked faster. The footsteps matched. Terrified, he sprinted toward the streetlights, his heart pounding. When he reached the edge of the field, the sound stopped. The snow behind him was unbroken. No second set of tracks, only his own. Another chilling account comes from a photographer who visited the plains in the early 2000s, hoping to capture atmospheric winter shots of the battlefield. As he set up his camera, he noticed a man standing nearby, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned coat. The man stood perfectly still, watching him. The photographer raised his hand in greeting. No response. He lifted his camera to snap a picture, and through the lens, the man was gone. He lowered the camera. The field was empty. Some say the spirits of the plains do not always appear in full form. Sometimes they manifest as shadows moving through the snow, as mists that coil into shapes of men, as flickers of light that dart across the field. Paranormal teams have photographed strange glowing orbs hovering over the ground, only to vanish seconds later. But the most terrifying stories come not from tourists, but from those who live nearby. Residents of Quebec City, whose homes overlook the plains, have reported seeing soldiers outside their windows at night. Dark figures, half visible in the snow, standing motionless, staring upward before dissolving into the storm. Others have been woken by the distant sound of musket fire, so loud they were certain a reenactment was happening outside. Yet in the morning, the snow is untouched. No footprints, no disturbances, only silence. Skeptics continue to dismiss these stories. They say the mind plays tricks, especially in the eerie quiet of winter nights. But those who have stood on the plains, those who have heard the boots in the snow, insist otherwise. They know what they felt. They know what they saw. And if the dead are still marching, still whispering, still haunting the battlefield, then perhaps the war on the plains of Abraham never truly ended. Not all the spirits of the plains of Abraham are nameless soldiers. Some say that the commanders themselves, the men whose deaths defined the battle, also walk this ground. General James Wolfe, leader of the British forces, was mortally wounded during the battle. He died on the field, surrounded by his men, who assured him that victory was his. To this day, legends whisper that Wolfe never left. A tall figure in a red military coat is sometimes spotted at the edge of the battlefield, gazing out toward the city. Witnesses describe a man with sharp features, pale as the snow itself, who lingers silently before fading into the mist. Paranormal investigators call him the Red Ghost of Quebec. On the other side, the French commander, the Marquis de Montcalm, also met his end that day. Struck by musket fire, he was carried back into the city, where he succumbed to his wounds. Some say his spirit returned to the battlefield, unwilling to abandon the men who died under his command. Locals report seeing a figure in blue or white, sometimes kneeling, sometimes walking alone through the drifts of snow as though still searching for peace. When storms rage and snow blankets the plains, some claim to see both commanders, Wolfe in red, Montcalm in blue, facing each other again. Silent shadows of a duel that ended centuries ago, replayed over and over in the endless winter. But the plains are only part of Quebec City's haunted heart. Step beyond the battlefield, and you find a city built on layers of blood, stone, and sorrow. Quebec City is often called the most haunted city in North America. Its cobblestone streets are lined with centuries-old buildings, many of them with dark pasts. Murders, executions, epidemics, all have left their mark. The Morin Center, once a prison, is said to echo with the cries of inmates even now. The Chateau Frontenac, the city's most famous hotel, is home to tales of ghostly apparitions wandering its luxurious halls. In the narrow alleys of Old Quebec, especially at night when snow falls and footsteps echo, feel more like a labyrinth of the dead than a tourist destination. But it is the plains of Abraham that draw the most attention. Why? Because they are open, exposed, and drenched in history. The battlefield is not tucked away behind walls or hidden underground. Lies bare, under the sky, under the snow, waiting for anyone brave enough to walk across it after dark. Paranormal experts suggest that snow itself might amplify hauntings. Snow absorbs sound, creating an eerie silence that heightens every small noise. Reflects moonlight, making shadows seem sharper, more alive. Storms stir the imagination. Wind howling through the fields like the screams of the dying, flakes stinging the skin like frozen shrapnel. The conditions mimic, in some strange way, the chaos of battle. Locals swear that hauntings intensify in winter. More sightings are reported during snowstorms than in summer. More footsteps are heard when the ground is frozen, or soldiers appear when the plains are white. It is as though the spirits of the battle rise with the snow, called back to the surface by the season of ice and silence. One chilling account tells of a group of college students who dared each other to cross the plains during a blizzard. Laughing and joking, they stepped onto the field, but halfway through, the laughter stopped. They heard drums.
That faint.
Not imagined, but loud and rhythmic, beating closer and closer. Panic set in. One student claimed he saw shapes forming in the snow, rows of men materializing out of the storm. The group bolted for the nearest street, stumbling through the drifts. When they looked back, the field was empty, the storm howling, the drums gone. But to this day, none of them will walk the plains at night again. Another tale comes from a city worker clearing snow near the battlefield in the early hours of the morning. He reported seeing lantern lights bobbing across the field as though carried by men on patrol. Curious, he slowed his machine, watching. But then he realized the lights were moving against the wind, steady and controlled, not flickering like real flames. He climbed down to take a closer look, and the lights disappeared. The next morning, he refused to take his shift alone. Stories like these pile up year after year, told by different voices and different times, but always the same theme. Soldiers. Marching, haunting, refusing to be forgotten. Skeptics argue that people project these visions onto the snow because they know the history. They come expecting ghosts, so they see them. But what about those who didn't know the story? The tourists who stumbled onto the plains unaware of its past, only to encounter footsteps, shadows, or whispers? What about the children who hear drums in the snow, not yet old enough to understand what a battlefield even is? The truth is harder to dismiss when it comes from those who had no reason to invent it. Quebec City thrives on history. Its walls, its churches, its battlefields, all preserved as monuments to the past. But monuments cannot contain everything. Some pieces of the past refuse to be locked away. They bleed into the present, carried by the snow, awakened by the silence of winter nights. And if the stories are true, then the Plains of Abraham are not just a park. They are a stage where history repeats itself endlessly, where soldiers rise each time the snow falls, where the ghosts of generals and their men march forever toward a battle that never ends. The snow has always been part of Quebec City's soul. Falls every winter, covering the rooftops, softening the streets, and blanketing the Plains of Abraham in silence. To most, it is beautiful. A postcard scene, a winter wonderland. But to those who know the history, the snow is not just decoration. It is a veil, thin curtain between the living and the dead. And when it falls thick enough, When the night is quiet enough, that curtain is pulled aside. The plains are not just a battlefield from the past, they are a wound that never healed. The ground here swallowed thousands of lives in a single morning. It soaked their blood, their screams, their last breaths. And history tells us that places of great violence rarely stay silent forever. Locals will tell you the plains feel different from the rest of the city. Even in daylight, there's an edge in the air, a tension you can't quite name. In winter, it sharpens. The vast white field seems too empty, too still. Some say the silence presses down like a weight, as if the land itself is waiting for something. Others swear the stillness is broken by echoes from another time, boots crunching in formation, voices calling orders in French or English, the deep boom of a cannon that hasn't fired in centuries. And then there are the apparitions. Not everyone sees them, but enough have spoken that the stories cannot be ignored. Soldiers, their uniforms frosted with snow, marching as though trapped in a loop. Generals Wolfe and Montcalm, bound to the place where their destinies collided. Lantern lights drifting against the wind. Drums in the storm. Shadows where no man should stand. Skeptics dismiss it all. They say the human mind is suggestible. That snow distorts sound, that fog plays tricks on the eyes, that people see what they expect to see. But even skeptics grow quiet when the stories come from those with no expectations at all. Tourists with no knowledge of history, children too young to understand what a battlefield is, workers who never asked for ghost stories but found themselves in the middle of one anyway. And so the legend grows, year after year, snowfall after snowfall. The Plains of Abraham are no longer just a chapter in history books. They're alive in whispers, shadows, and chilling encounters. A battlefield that refuses to let go. Some say the spirits linger because they were never given proper burials. Others believe they march endlessly because they died suddenly, their lives cut short, their duty unfinished. And some claim it is the sheer scale of violence, the blood spilled, the trauma endured, that imprinted itself into the land forever. Whatever the reason, the result is the same. The plains are haunted. Perhaps the most unsettling thought is this: the battle itself may still be happening, not in flesh and blood, but in echoes. Every snowstorm replays that September morning of 1759. The soldiers return. The generals take their places, and the cries of war rise once again into the freezing night. History on an endless loop, locked in the land, etched into the snow. Stand there long enough and you may feel it too, the weight of unseen eyes on you. The slow approach of footsteps behind you. The sting of icy air that feels different from the weather. And if you listen closely, you might hear them. The soldiers of Quebec's haunted battlefield, still fighting, still marching, still trapped. The city around them has moved on. Quebec has grown, thrived, and turned into one of the most beautiful destinations in the world. But the plains remain, silent, waiting, haunted. So the next time you visit Quebec City in winter, when the snow is falling heavy and the wind cuts across the open field, remember this: you are not walking on a simple park. You are stepping onto sacred ground, a graveyard without headstones, a stage where the dead still perform their final act. And if you feel a presence, if you hear boots in the snow or see shadows in the storm, do not linger, do not follow, because on the Plains of Abraham, the soldiers of the past may not realize that the war is over. They may think you are part of it, and they may never let you leave.